I think that as people are still logging in, we can wait for a couple more minutes.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Marina.
Yes, so welcome everyone, and thank you for joining. Okay, so I think that we can start. So hello everyone, my name is Marina Angelaki, and together with Pavla Raudó and Timea Crofoni, we would like to welcome you to this GenderAction webinar on Gender in Horizon Europe, which is part of a series of webinars that are organized by the GenderAction project. And we would also like to thank you once again for your interest in our webinars. So before we start, I would like to share with you some practical information. As you can see, you are muted so as to optimize the audio quality. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available afterwards at the project website, where you can also find previous webinars and also news about the upcoming ones. If you have any questions, we kindly ask you to use the chat function, and we will address them at the end of the webinars. We have a dedicated session for that. In this presentation, we have included some useful background reading, in addition to some useful references that we think could be useful for your work. At the end of the webinar, we will also share with you an evaluation form that we would like to kindly ask you to fill in, as this helps us in organizing our future events. So in terms of the structure of the webinar, I will start with a short introduction about the GenderAction project, and then I will give the floor to my colleagues and gender experts that will start with a short introduction related to some basic concepts in relation to gender equality, such as sex, gender, and intersectionality. Then they will present the new aspects related to gender in Horizon Europe. And then they will move on to presenting the gender equality plans, their structure, target groups, the timeline. And they will also present some examples of gender equality plans. Following a short break, we will then move on to explore the integration of the gender dimension in research and innovation. And this will be followed by some examples on how to include the gender dimension in projects that will allow you to have a better picture, and in this way support the researchers. And as I mentioned before, at the end, we have a Q&A session where we will be able to answer any questions that you may have. So this webinar, as you know, is part of a series of webinars that have been that are being organized by the GenderAction project. GenderAction started in 2017 and runs until this September. It's a Horizon 2020 funded project, and its aim is to create an innovative policy community that brings together representatives from member states and associate countries that are members of the former Helsinki group. Now it's called the Standing Working Group in Gender in Research and Innovation, with the aim to advance gender equality and support the implementation of gender priority and gender mainstreaming in the European research area, something that is also known as ERA Priority 4. And this is done both at the national, European, and international level. And at the same time, to enhance policy coordination, the exchange of experiences and best practices among more and less experienced countries. So to achieve the above goals, the project has organized a number of activities throughout the years. If we could please move to the next slide. Thank you. A key activity has been the analysis of the member states' progress in relation to reaching the ERA Priority 4 goal. And we have done so by analyzing the member states' action plans and strategies. We have delivered a number of training events, physical events, webinars such as this one, as well as mutual learning events. And at the same time, we have targeted a variety of stakeholders, national contact points such as the webinar that we are organizing today, but also universities and research institutes, funding agencies. Obviously, we're in close collaboration with the Standing Working Group on Gender in Research and Innovation, and also institutions at the international level. We have also prepared a number of policy briefs and position papers tackling various aspects of the gender dimension in ERA. I will share the link with you, as you can all access them on our project website. These policy briefs and position papers have been translated in a number of languages, such as Czech, Greek, Polish. And some of them also tackle issues related to the gender dimension in Horizon Europe. And we have also built new collaborations at the international level. So in terms of the project impact, we have developed a methodology for measuring progress in relation to the implementation of priority 4. And we have also provided training and enhanced the expertise among a variety of stakeholders, both at the national and European and also international level. And we feel that throughout the work that we have done over the past years, we have contributed in shifting the imbalance between more and less experienced countries in the EU. So as I mentioned before, this webinar is part of a series of webinars that are targeting Horizon Europe national contact points. And the aim is to help them in better understanding the new provisions related to the gender dimension. So I will now give the floor to my colleagues Pavla and Timea. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Marina. Thank you for the introduction and explanation. My name is Timea, and together with Pavla, we will lead today's workshop. And as a starting point, we would like to clarify certain basic concepts regarding the gender equality and the policies of gender equality. So let's just briefly assume what we will talk about when we speak about sex, gender, and intersectionality, which is important to explain in order to understand the policies. When we will refer to sex, we will refer to the biological attributes, to physiology, to composition of hormones, chromosomes, and reproductive organs, and so on. And of course, we don't have only men and women, but there are also people who are intersex regarding their biology and physiology. When we will speak about gender, on the other hand, gender refers to the socially constructed and constituted and culturally determined roles, expectations, behaviors, expressions, and often also it's connected to certain gender stereotypes. Gender is rather a spectrum, and it can change during the lifetime, and it also based on geographical and historical context. When we will speak about intersectionality, we will speak about certain perspective or framework, which is an approach which makes visible certain crossroads or overlaps of different social identities, and thus is not enough to speak only about groups of men or groups of women, but what about their age? What about their ethnic background? What about their religion, their physical or psychological abilities or disabilities, and so on? This perspective asks how sex and gender interact with other categories of our identity, and in which way and how they somehow create new forms of identities which are potentially disadvantaged, or they can be potentially discriminated under certain circumstances. So this was just a brief beginning about the concepts, just to be sure we are talking about the same things during our workshop. And now let's move on to gender problematics in under Horizon Europe, new European framework. The novelties of Horizon Europe in comparison with Horizon 2020 brings certain new concepts of or concepts which are stressed out by the European Commission. And one of them is this intersectional approach, that we need to somehow widen our understanding of discrimination, and we have to think about other categories, as I mentioned before, which is age, ethnicity, disability, and so on. Also, one of the news is that the integration of gender dimension into research and development is a default requirement. It's an award criterion, which means that you will have to somehow reflect the gender dimension. And my colleague Pavla will speak about it more in the second part of this workshop. And it's somehow a condition sine qua non, which means that you have to deal with gender dimension every time. And if it's not applicable for your project, you will have to explain why and which ideas led you to the to this lack of gender dimension in your project. For public bodies, for universities, research organizations, and so on, there will be a new eligibility criterion to have implemented gender equality plan since 2022. And on the next slide, we will get more into this. Also, European Commission announced that there will be provided special funding for inclusive gender equality plans and special funding for gender studies and intersectional studies. Also, the whole program aims to support female researchers, and by different means. For example, there will be an award for female researchers and so on. And there will be one ranking criterion, which is also important for you to be familiar with, which is gender balance of research teams. In case the two projects will get the same ranking, you will be prioritized if the gender balance is better in your project specifically. Basically, there are 4 levels on which gender comes into play under Horizon Europe. First of them is this already mentioned eligibility criterion. To be able to apply for the Horizon, you will have to have gender equality plan as an institution. There is this gender dimension by default, which is award criterion. This mentioned ranking criterion, gender balance of research teams. And according to the general annexes of the Horizon, beneficiaries must also take all measures to promote equal opportunities between men and women in implementing the action and, where applicable, in line with their gender equality plan. And they also must aim to achieve, to the extent as possible, a gender balance at all levels of personnel assigned to the action, which is a cross-cutting priority through the whole project. We have certain updates on eligibility criterion, and I will I will lead you through these novelties and updates. For example, there were questions from institutions whether there is a retroactivity for this eligibility criterion. European Commission said that for this year, 2021, there is a transition period. So you don't have to have gender equality plan if the calls have deadlines in this year. It's applicable for calls in 2001 with deadline in 2022. It's enough to have a self-declaration of institution that gender equality plan is implemented and it meets the minimal requirements, so-called building blocks, and we will discuss them in detail later on. Which is applicable in the proposal stage. If your project is selected for the funding following evaluations, there is a period until grant agreement signature to confirm that the plan is in place. So, for example, in the proposal stage, you don't have it yet, but it doesn't interfere with the evaluation. It will be checked during the moment of grant agreement signature. European Commission also announced that they will randomly check this criterion and the structure of gender equality plan and meeting the requirements. If all the minimum requirements are met and the recommended areas by European Commission are covered, another strategic document can be considered as gender equality plan. It means that if you have, for example, strategic plan, action plan of HR award or other documents, and they fulfill together the requirements for the gender equality plan, it can be as a whole, as this whole package, it can be considered as gender equality plan, but European Commission suggests that you should somehow at least summarize the important part to one document to be to make it more understandable for not even for your employees or your students, but also for the Commission's checks. This criterion is only applicable for public bodies, research organizations, or higher educational institutions, not for private ones, not for NGOs, etc. Gender equality plan does not have to be in English. It can be in the native language of your state. But of course, trying to fight against discrimination, it also means that if you have international employees and students, it is highly recommended to write it as well in English to be approachable for everyone. And now I would like to speak more in general about the gender equality plan. What is exactly gender equality plan? Basically, it's a tool to change your working environment. It's a holistic plan tailor-made by and for institution, and it contains certain objectives in recommended areas connected with specific measures and activities, how to reach this objective, how to change the situation. Of course, you will have to also set the indicators, how you will measure the steps toward the gender equality and so on. You should also somehow define your target groups, because certain provisions will be only applicable on the researchers, certain ones will be applicable for your administrative workers, and certain ones are only applicable for students, of course. It's also good to think about the timeline, whether the objectives can be reached during certain time, and if it's doable, basically. You should also dedicate your personal sources and divide the responsibilities for carrying out the whole plan, who will be responsible for which activities and so on. And last but not least, also the financial aspect is very important. So we are talking about budget, and if you have enough finances to finance your activities throughout the whole cycle of gender equality plan. Gender equality plan is not something which is prescribed by European Commission for everyone, the same template, for example. It should be unique for every institution or organization according to your own needs, your size, your legal national context, and so on. And it does not have to be for the purposes of Horizon Europe. It does not have to be a new document if you already work with gender equality plan, but you should check whether it meets the requirements by European Commission, and somehow renew it if it's necessary. And also think about this intersectional perspective, whether you somehow consider other possible categories of discrimination, or other people who can be disadvantaged by your actions. European Commission for Gender Equality Plan set certain minimum process related requirements. They call it building blocks, as you can find them in general annexes to the program. And also I would like to mention that on the slides with stars, these are the slides you can somehow show to the institutions you work with, because these are the most important information for them. So building blocks, there are basically 4 building blocks which needs to be met through your gender equality plan. One requirement considers publication. It needs to be a formal document published on the institutional website and signed by the top management. Of course, not the whole plan needs to be made public, because there can be certain parts, for example, about finances or information under GDPR protection. And so this is also a thing to consider, whether you will have a general document made visible on your website, and certain more detailed plan only for inner purposes. Also, there needs to be dedicated resources. As I spoke about a budget, there needs to be commitment of resources and expertise in gender equality to implement the plan. You will have to decide who will be responsible for what, and what money allocation will be made to really work. There should be also a data collection and monitoring. You will have to have a sex gender disaggregated data on personnel and students, and annually reported based on indicators. And very important thing, which is also new, there have to be awareness-raising trainings on gender equality and unconscious bias for staff and decision makers. So it's good to think about it ahead. How will you make it if it's annually done workshop about gender equality, if it's compulsory for all your employees or students and so on, and you will have to describe it in your plan. There are also thematic areas of work to be covered by gender equality plan. These areas are recommended, not compulsory, but if you want to have a holistic plan to work together pretty well, it should be covered. First of them is work-life balance problematics and organizational culture. Then it's gender balance in leadership and decision-making. Then it's gender equality in recruitment and career progression, integration of gender dimension into research and teaching content. And this will be the topic covered by my colleague Pavla after the break. And also you should cover the measures against gender-based violence, including sexual harassment, which is one of the parts of the whole problematics of gender-based violence. Let's now take a look, very brief one, about the cycle of gender equality plan, because gender equality plan is not something you will have to have for the whole life or your institution. It should be renewed or updated after a certain period of time. Basically, we recommend 3 or 4 years cycles, and you start with analysis with so-called gender audit, which is a tool to assess and check the level of gender equality of the institution regarding its policies, its communication, its programs, structure, composition of personnel, and so on. And it's basically a baseline which identifies the problematic aspects of your organizational culture, and thus identify the areas to be improved towards the reaching the gender equality. After you have this identification of the problems, you plan and design your gender equality plan based on the outcomes of the audit. And then, of course, there is this part of implementation. And based on the set indicators, you will monitor and then evaluate how successful you were in fulfilling the requirements you set at the initial stage of the gender equality plan. After this whole cycle of 3 or 4 years, then you will repeat your audit, and you will find out whether something changed, whether your plan needs to be renewed, and what are the next challenges you will have to face. You can stress out to the institutions you will work with that through the whole cycle of gender equality plan, it's necessary to communicate the steps throughout the institution. It's a crucial part for the sustainability and success of the plan. And it's good to think about how you will present the whole topic, the whole problematics of gender equality, because certain type of communication can even raise the resistances and barriers in the institution. It's great to include as many people from different positions and to approach it with participatory or co-creational approach, which means that people from your institution, like employees and students, will co-create the plan with you based on their needs. we decided to provide you certain examples of the plan, and these plans you see on the slide were developed through the, for example, Supera project, Gearing Roles, Equalist, and also we recommend to visit web page of European Institution for Gender Equality, because there is this so-called GEAR tool, which will lead you through the whole gender equality and gender mainstreaming problematics, and you will find the examples collected by European Institute, and it's very useful for your practice. I won't go through all of them. I just wanted to show you one excerpt from the Equalist project. It's from the Gender Equality Plan of University of Minster, how it looks like. This is just an excerpt, and they basically identified, based on gender audit, they identified certain challenges. For example, people don't see a value in gender and usage of gender-sensitive language. What is the objective? It's to raise awareness about the value, of course, and there are certain actions connected to these objectives. And it can be, for example, awareness raising trainings for students, for PR departments, for employees, and so on. And there you can see the department responsible for carrying out the activities. Also, when you would go through the rest of the gender equality plan, you will see that those actions are described in detail, and this is just for as a suggestion how you can you approach it. In this presentation, this presentation will be provided to you, so you can back to these projects to see them all, to read them by yourself, and to suggest those examples to the institutions which will contact you as NCPs. Also, we have certain examples provided for inspiration. For example, for covering of work-life balance, you can fund to support staff who care for children or others to attend conferences. This is the good practice of institutions, for example, in United Kingdom or Germany or Denmark. There is possible to provide teaching-free period for people who are returning from parental leave, and so on. I don't want to go into detail on these examples, but you can, of course, go through it later on, because this is just for inspiration, and much more examples are visible on in GEAR tool provided by European Institution of Gender Equality. So these are the thematic areas how to change, for example, the organizational culture and symbolic order. As we talked about compulsory awareness raising and gender sensitivity trainings, you can remove stereotypes through capacity building and with usage of gender sensitive communication throughout your inner and outer communication of the institution, and balanced visible representation in your PR materials, and so on. Gender equality in recruitment and career progression is of course supported by open position advertising with gender-sensitive language describing the position. You can positively affirm that women are welcome when underrepresented, or men are welcomed when they are underrepresented. And you can also actively find and reach out to possible female candidates or men, of course, if this is the pool which is underrepresented. For example, also Hungarian Academy of Sciences, considering the career progression, they decided to extend the age limits for the researchers who have children under the age of 10, if there is a limit applicable for grants and awards. So basically it also changes not only the career progression measures and evaluation, but it also changes the whole symbolic order of the institutions, because it sends the message that parents are considered in their research careers, and the institution is trying to somehow improve the working environment. And also the integration of the gender dimension into research content. Pavla will speak, as I mentioned before, Pavla will speak about it in detail. But of course, first you need to be educated in the gender problematics, and you need to educate the people in your institution to understand the whole problematics and what it means to implement or consider the gender dimension into research. So one provision in gender equality plan can be a mandatory training for understanding these topics and so on. And you can also make the problematics visible by, for example, starting the award or prize for the best integration of gender perspective into research and teaching, as University of Santiago de Compostela did. So these are just brief examples of how you can set the measures into the plan. And I think that right now we can take a break of 10 minutes, and Pavla will continue. And at the end of her part, we will make time for the discussion.
No, actually, if I may, I would now start a little discussion. I was trying to answer some questions in the chat box, but I'm writing slower than speaking.
Okay, so, we can surely answer some of the questions.
I would dedicate now, if we can, 10 minutes to answering some of the questions that were asked now, and then we could have the break, because we would remember it better. I was now answering to series question on I did not understand one aspect. How could an application be selected for funding following evaluations? If, according to my understanding, you would not be eligible to be selected for funding in case you cannot self-declare the existence of gender equality plan. I didn't finish the answer, I was writing it now. So I think this provision, the self-declaration before submission of the project proposal, is in place for the beginning stage, because it is expected that many institutions, especially from Eastern and Central Europe, won't have the gender equality plans or any similar policies in place, and European Commission does not want to kind of discriminate against or stop them from applying. But they want them, European Commission wants the institutions to work on it. So that's why it is kind of like beginning stage where they would self-declare it, they would apply for the project. And in the meantime, because it takes some time, they will have time to work on their gender equality plans and implement them. And because this is still in the phase of negotiation at the level of European Commission, I think in later stages this will change, and institutions in some years from, I believe, 2022 or 2023 on will actually have to have them even when at the stage of applying. I hope I answered your question on that.
Yeah, and I wanted to share this page. It's called Funding and Gender Opportunities, and European Commission put there a section of frequently asked questions, and this basically, so you can visit the page, of course, and this basically answers your question. At this time, as Pavla mentioned, it will be possible to submit a proposal without gender equality plan, because there is this transition period. And once a project proposal is selected for funding following evaluations, partners will have to have gender equality plan at the moment of grant agreement signature. And basically, if you go to the project website where you submit your proposal, at the beginning, at the initial phase, you will probably have to write, no, we don't have a gender equality plan yet. But after summarization and evaluation, and when the funding will be, or the project will be selected for the funding, you will have to again somehow update your information, and for the signature you will have to again write there the state of the implementation, and at this moment you have to fill in that yes, it's already in place, but there is this transition period before the submission and until the agreement signature.
And also, I was answering Ian's question about if an institution has an HR policy covering gender issues, we don't need to draw up a new JEP. I answered that probably your HR policies do not cover all the thematic areas, and the same. And then in connection to this, there was a question from Veronica and from Liene, which is who are asking kind of similar things, and I replied that JEP should cover the thematic areas, and at the same time, Veronica and Liene, you are right, and Ian as well, that those are only recommended areas, and you can probably, and as I said, you can probably take your HR policies and present them as JEP. However, as one of the requirements is that it should be publicly available documents that should be standing alone somehow, then at least kind of summing up or summarizing your HR policies and how they cover the recommended thematic areas would be recommended, or having a, let's say, website, a part of your website that says gender equality plan, and then you summarize there all the actions or all the policies that you have in place in your institution. That would be probably kind of recommended. What do you say, Timea?
Yeah, and I would like to also stress out that HR award plans are the target group of HR award are researchers, and gender equality plan should be, as we mentioned, holistic, which means that it should cover the whole institution, and HR award plans are not targeted on administrative workers or students, basically. So it should be somehow at least widened to support the whole institution, not only researchers.
And in case of universities, for example, it has to include also students, which I believe the HR policies that are not working with. And this is also a question from Erik from Sweden. If European Commission has made some sync between HR certification and gender equality plan, or if there are any major differences that need specific actions for gender equality plan. And Timea usually answers this question, but I will say that as I wrote, there is a Casper project that is kind of working on making this certification for gender equality in European Union. However, they will try to, in this certification, they will somehow try to implement, like they will try to work on both. And the answer was what Stima just said, that it has to be targeting all the staff of institutions, not just research personnel. I don't know if you want to add anything to it as well, Tima.
Well, I was just answering one question in the chat box. Sorry, so
if there is any difference between the kind of certification for gender equality plans or evaluation of gender equality plans and the HR policies promoted by European Commission in recent.
Well, we don't know exactly how the European Commission will check the requirements. It's based on the self-declaration, and European Commission just announced that they will carry out random compliance checks during the Horizon Europe. And so basically, we don't know exactly, because it's new provision, how European Commission plans to do or carry out these checks.
Yeah, and the certification is still kind of being negotiated, and it's we don't think the certification will be anything that will appear during Horizon Europe. I think this is for a longer period of time, negotiations. So maybe for the next program, it will be already in place. And by that, we will have clear answers to how it connects to HR policies, or maybe they will actually kind of put it in one certification and don't have it separately for gender and separately for HR. That's what we expect, but it's not clear yet. So sorry for not having clear answers to this yet. And as I said, please follow the Casper project. They will probably have some news on that sooner or later. Thank you. Any other questions? Now, if you want to speak, you don't have to write in the chat box anymore. You can speak up if you want to. Otherwise, we could take the 10-minute break as Timea announced. Okay, I don't see anyone writing anymore or talking, so let's meet at 11:03. So we have 10 minutes, and I will talk about the gender dimension. Thank you. I think we can start. I hope you are all back. I don't know if Marina, you wanted to say anything so far?
No, I think that we can start. I think that we're really happy to see that our participants are very happy. They have a lot of questions, and we do understand that JEPs are the new thing in Horizon Europe, so it's quite natural that they have a lot of questions. But as we mentioned in the beginning, we have a dedicated session at the end of the webinar where we will be able to answer any questions that you may have. So I suppose that the discussions will continue after Pavla's presentation. I hope that everyone is back. So I think that I can give the floor back to Pavla to start sharing her screen and move to the second part of the webinar.
Thank you. I would actually like to start with a little poll for everybody. We would like to know if any institution, I assume you are NCP, so you work probably with institutions who apply for Horizon. So have any institutions you work with for applications in Horizon considered gender dimension? We will wait for everybody to vote. Yes, no, I don't know. There are all answers. I'll leave some more time to everyone. Now we have half of the participants answered so far. Let's see if everybody is back. Still some answers are coming, so I'll leave one more minute for everybody. Okay, it seems there are no more votes coming in, so I will end the poll. And mostly 40% of those who answered actually have considered or worked with institutions and considered the gender dimension of research in their project proposals, and some didn't, and some almost 40% as well. Don't know if they did or not because it's not their consent. I'll share the results. This is what they look like, and now I stop sharing. So this is an answer, or those are the answers I actually expected a little, because gender dimension was already to be included in Horizon 2020, but it was not a requirement by default as it is now in Horizon Europe. Let's have a look at, I hope you can see my screen. And start sharing now. So, gender dimension of research and development, as I said, is now award criteria in Horizon Europe. And as before, there were excellence criteria for the research project. And they were the clarity and pertinence of research or project objective, and the extent to which the proposed work was ambitious and goes beyond the state of the art. And now the appropriate consideration of gender dimension in research and innovation content and also the soundness of proposed methodology, which is connected to gender dimension, are the award criteria. So as to make it kind of easy to understand, in Horizon 2020, if you somehow included gender analysis or gender dimension in your research, you got plus points, or it was points in excellence. Now, you have to actually reason for why you did not include a gender dimension. So by default, you are supposed to do that. And in specific calls, maybe there will be some exceptions where it would be said beforehand that you don't have to include gender dimension. So either you will apply in those specific calls and you will not have to include gender dimension, or you will have to explain why the gender dimension wasn't relevant for your research. Why do we need to integrate the gender dimension into research and innovations or research and development? Every cell is sexed and every person is gendered, that's why. And inclusion of gender dimension brings added value to research in terms of excellence and rigor, reproducibility and creativity and business opportunities as well, since the outcomes of your research or product are being made for the whole population, not just maybe half of it. It also brings an in-depth understanding of all people's needs and behaviors and attitudes. And as I said, the goods and services are better suited for the needs of different citizens. And as Tima explained, the intersectionality is a big topic because we cannot say that there are just men and women, but there are different groups of men, different groups of women, and different groups of other identities. The gender dimension also enhances societal relevance of research and innovation. And so people actually perceive science as something that is being made for everybody, not just for inclusive or exclusive group of people. What is the gender dimension defined as by European Commission, or what is gender dimension considered as? It is the addressing of gender dimension in research and innovation content that entails taking into account sex and gender, or sex or gender, in the whole research and innovation process. The integration of gender dimension is mandatory, as I said, unless it is explicitly mentioned in the topic description or proposal description. I would refer you to check publication that I sent into chat box, and you can also find it on the website of European Commission, which is called Gender Innovation. There is second publication of it. And there you have very good examples and very detailed examples how to include in which scientific field or discipline, how to include gender analysis or sex analysis into your research. And there is also a fact sheet called Gender Innovations that explain very briefly why European Commission considers it so important to include that. You can also see or read an interview with European Commissioner for Innovation, Research, Culture, Education and Youth, who talks about including gender dimension and why European Commission takes it into account now. And also in Nature magazine, there was one editorial dedicated to this topic as well. Now, how to integrate systematically gender dimension in research project. I wrote here analyzing gender and analyzing sex. As Timea was talking about, sometimes we just consider one of them, sometimes we consider both, and we have to consider one or both in different stages of the project proposal or research project. Already in the identifying the problem phase, or basically bringing the research ideas, you have to ask questions such as, Have you considered how assessment of gender or sex, including stereotypes about what is considered female and male, can affect what you want to investigate, what questions you ask and how to answer them? So maybe you defined a research problem, but already that can be a stereotypical assumption about the world, which is based only on stereotypes and not on reality. So then you can ask, is gender or sex important for understanding the phenomenon you are investigating or researching? And if so, how can that be important? Are there other dimensions that can be considered in relation with gender and sex, such as, and here we talk again about intersectionality, such as age, ethnicity, education level, income level, occupation, geographical location, etc., etc. Or also in the identifying research problem phase, have you reviewed literature and other sources relating to sex gender research in your scientific field? So this all already comes in place when placing ideas about research, or basically kind of summarizing the problem you or phenomena you are going to research. Then in design research, designing your research, you can ask, does the project research topic and methods take sex and gender into account? And does my proposal explain how gender dimension or sex dimension will be handled? Am I or my colleagues, are we trained in gender topics, or do we know what is the difference between sex and gender, etc.? Have you considered whether the results of the research can have different effects on, let's say, men and women or boys and girls? Can the research contribute to advancement of maybe gender equality even? And then the methods, research methods I'm using, and the collection of data, it's connected. Other research methods such as questionnaires, focus groups, design in a way that consider possible sex and gender differences. I will tell this example. It shows that women have different answers or different results in questionnaires if you ask their gender first in the questionnaire. So, and if you ask it as last question, you would have different responses. So maybe that already is a thing to consider when you place, as a social scientist, let's say, a questionnaire to people. And in analyzing, will sex and gender be a variable in the analysis? Will other variables be included in relation to sex and gender? Are unconscious or stereotypical assumptions about sex and gender implicit in the interpretation of data? Are there dimensions other than sex and gender important to consider? Again, intersectionality. So in all the different parts of your research project, you can include that. You can analyze gender and analyze sex in, let's say, case of cell research, etc. And even in dissemination phase of the research project, is the gender dimension or sex dimension included in presentation of my results? Is it done the way, am I kind of presenting my results in a way that is stereotypical, for example, or do I reflect on other categories than just gender and sex? And how have you considered the dissemination of research findings towards different networks and institutions and journals and conferences that maybe address gender issues as well? So I would also refer you here to a website called Gendered Innovations that is made by Stanford University, and the same team is who've done that is working on the gender innovation publication that I sent in the chat box. And you can find particular questions and particular problems for each of the research phase that you can reflect on, either regarding sex or regarding gender. And you can find different checklists there, etc. So I would strongly recommend you to go to that webpage, and Tima, please send a link to that to chat box now, but you can also find a link in our presentation. I also wanted to show you how very often you have to take sex and gender into account at the same time. For example, this is also taken from the webpage Gendered Innovations. For example, in researching non-communicable diseases such as, let's say, heart attack or diabetes, etc. The symptoms and the outcomes and the other things related to the disease are actually a combination of sex and gender, because there are some sex-related biological factors such as birth rate and growth rate, but also many of the factors that we would maybe consider stereotypically sexed are gendered. For example, smoking and obesity are not solely things that influence in the biological category, but they are gendered related social factors, or maternal nutrition as well. For example, in very traditional communities, it's proven that boys are fed more than girls, and it's not reflected upon that. So many things that can be researched are a combination of sex and gender, not just sex or not just gender. The most common mistakes and risks in kind of using the gender analysis or sex analysis is that you use certain gender stereotypes. As I said, you might ascribe something to sex and it's actually a cultural and social thing. Or you may consider something to be typical for women or typical for men, etc. Also, and Timea already mentioned that, if you take sex and gender just as binary categories, you are missing out on the people and phenomena in between. So it's more like a spectrum, and it's also good to approach it like that in your research. And very important, and that's what European Commission is talking about now, is the intersectionality, that other variables are playing in a very important role in the analysis and in possible discrimination. So other social categories, as I said already, and as Timea already explained. Also, some differences may be automatically assigned to sex. So sex is taken for gender and the other way around. And sometimes you may over accentuate the differences between men and women without having proof of their role in the research topic. So maybe the differences are not actually that important, but you take them as very important. Or, and that was, for example, Gina Rippon in neuro research or research of a brain, talks about overlooking the proofs that there are minimal or no differences. For example, in brain functions, there are bigger differences between two men or two women than between men and women. And we only hear about research proving how big the differences between men and women in their brains are. So those might be the common mistakes and risks. So you can recommend the people whom you work with to pay attention to those. And now I would kind of say very briefly some examples of including or not including gender dimension into research in some research or scientific areas. In information and communication technologies and robotics, for example, if we take access to internet, economically and culturally, it's proven that women have less access to internet. They are not as able as men to, in many countries and societies, to access internet because, for example, many of them are living or are living in poverty and cannot afford it, for example. Also, there are ethical issues in developing artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is kind of thought on vast amounts of data, and data very often is biased, and it's not reflected much on whom we have the data from. So some machines or some artificial intelligence softwares can be only thought on data concerning men, for example, or on the other hand, data concerning women, not taking into account the other side of the spectrum or other possible dimensions or categories, intersectional categories. And I have here very good example of voice and face recognition. For example, some of the softwares like Alexa were taught on male voice, and so they have very low response to female voice, just to say one example. Cyberviolence and cyberbullying, the topic is kind of like on the intersection of social research and ICT research, but there also you have proved that women are more subjected to cyberviolence than men. In medical sciences, the topic of sex and gender is very, very, very well researched, and you can find a lot of examples on non-including gender dimension. It's proven that, for example, women have different symptoms of many things. Just one example, heart attacks is different. The symptoms are different in men than in women. And we all know the male symptoms, let's say male symptoms. So this kind of taking the male body as the norm and researching on it, that's a very big topic and very big risk in medical sciences. Also, women experience pain differently. Clinical studies have for a long time been done only on one or other sex or gender, so and mostly male. So there is also a big gap between the research in that area and medication. Going hand in hand with this is usually what you find on your prescription is very often medication trials on male bodies. Also availability of products and services is different to each social category, let's say. And just one example, 10 years ago in European Union, artificial heart was developed. And it was developed in the size for male body. And now still there is, it's on market now. It's, for example, you can have it in Germany. You can buy it in Germany. And there is no artificial heart for women yet. 10 years later. So because women on average have smaller hearts than men, and there is no such product available to them yet. In environmental sciences, the climate change and extreme droughts, for example, are a topic that are phenomena that are influencing lives of women much more, because traditionally in many communities, women are those who take care of water provision, and they also provide food for their communities. So changes in climate influence more their lives than male lives. And the same with natural disasters. Women are much more endangered by them, or in danger by them, than men, because, for example, they don't have means to flee when there is some life-threatening situation. Also, attitudes to nature protection, resilience. In this area, you can, for example, take into account that women make, when as clients or as buyers, they make choices that are much more based on environmental protection and ecology. So sustainability is topic more for women than men, and they decide on basis of that more often than men. And societal norms and nature are also very much connected either in the attitudes to nature protection or also, for example, in some sort of societies, it's not considered a good thing for women to learn how to swim, for example. And it's connected to natural disasters as well. That when, for example, there is hurricane or floods, women do not survive as often as men. In the area of technology, there is a big topic is safety of vehicles and machinery. For a long time in crash test dummies, for example, they were not using female bodies. Now they are, but for example, pregnant female bodies were not represented in the tests for very, very long time. And that had little consequences for women when there were car accidents, etc. Also, one small example, usage of smart devices. Smartphones are usually made for male hand, for the size of male hand, and virtual reality devices such as helmets or glasses are also done for size of male heads by default. Also in the area of research and technology, there is very low diversity in the teams. So that's one of the concerns of European Commissions as well, to kind of push on having more diverse team in this area of research and others, of course. In transport and urban planning, it's proven, for example, that women use public transport very differently than men. They have more stops on way from and to work, let's say, or they use different means. Safety of public spaces as well. Women experience cities and public spaces differently, and safety is more of a concern for them than for men. And accessibility in urban context, accessibility of buildings, let's say, is also in architecture and urban planning is a big topic. It's not equal for everybody. And again, availability of services. If there is, for example, new neighborhood in a city planned, there has to be participatory planning because women have different needs and they need different services than men very often. Social sciences and humanities, I would say that the gender dimension is always relevant, and there is high importance of the intersectional approach. And I would just mention very few examples of non-including the gender dimension. For example, in archaeology, very often you could see examples from the past where when there was a female skeleton found with weapons or some kind of like war equipment, they would assume, the archaeologists would assume it couldn't be a woman, it would be like a mistake or something like that, or it could be a small boy or a young man instead of woman, because it was not according to the stereotypical imagination of how the past things were in society. Or sociology of work, for example, you could find that women need different room temperature in offices, let's say. Linguistics, their gender is very big topic. For example, in developing, and that's connected to artificial intelligence in developing linguistic and translation softwares. There is very big gender bias usually in the language. If you translate, I know that, for example, from Czech to German, if you translate word doctor, and if you translate word female doctor, it would give you the same result, though there are different words in German for the two. It would always give you the male version of doctor in the translation. So that's just one example from what I have experienced. In research in economics, you can see that, for example, retirement support or retirement money, women have different retirement money because different phenomena are taken into consideration when dividing this money. So it's also relevant for research in this area, and many more. I wouldn't go into details, but you can also again find some details in in the gendered innovation book or publication. Last but not least, agriculture. It's proven that some mechanical and technological innovations are done only for men. For example, if we have a tractor here on the picture, it's by default, this machinery is by default done for manipulation male bodies, and let's say land ownership is a big topic now. For example, in Czech Republic, we know that there are less and less women owning land since '89, since after a revolution here. So and across Europe, it's changing as well. The land ownership is smaller and smaller in women. Loss of biodiversity and traditional farming practices is also influencing more women who are the one who would use the traditional farming practices, and especially in developing countries, that is a big topic. Roles of women and men in agriculture, it goes basically hand in hand with the land ownership. Women are also less and less the managers of farms or bigger farms within European Union as well. So I have mentioned here a few resources. As I said, the Gendered Innovation as a publication that we send into the chat box, Gendered Innovation as a website by Stanford University. And I would also strongly recommend you to take a look at a book called Invisible Women, written by Carolyn Criado Perez, who writes about gender data gap and how many researchers did not include data about women, and you have particular examples there. So that would be for each discipline or area, at least one or few examples. And here I would like to, this is also taken from the Gendered Innovations publication, and here you have an example how to include women and men in different trials, basically different steps of trials in developing medicaments and drugs. So already regarding animals, you have to see if you use male and female animals, and if you include pregnant animals in the research, and how, for example, their age could also influence in the results, and how caging of these animals, of the research animals, could influence in the result. Are they caged together? Are they caged separately, etc.? In human trials, of course, you have to include women. You have to include younger and older people. Hormone data on their hormone levels is also very important, because then it has different, it changes different hormones. For example, if you take a drug or medicament, there are different thresholds for biomarkers. The disaggregated data is very important for the drug trials. And then you have different stages. And even you can see that even in post-marketing, you have to pay attention to it. And also you have to pay attention to it when you are actually writing the description and the usage paper for each medicament. It also has to be, there also have to be information on how, for example, different doses for men and women, or at least body weight, etc. So we included some resources, not only for gender dimension, but also for gender equality plans, and you have them in this presentation. And now I would like to ask you to place some questions for us, if anything was unclear.
I put, before Pavla started, I put 2 email addresses from European Commission when you also can place your questions, and also the website of frequently asked questions towards European Commissions, where you can certainly find answers for at least some of your questions. And also European Commission announced that during hopefully June or beginning of July, they will provide us detailed information about all the provisions, about gender equality plans and so on. And they will also, they also plan to have workshops and webinars, again, like this one, to lead you through the whole problematics. We basically are dependent on the official informations, which can be found in right now in general annexes, and from the whole concept of the politics of or policies of equality from the European strategy for equality, so-called Union or of equality, and so on. And
thank you, Tina. Any questions regarding either plans or gender dimension of research? Anyone? Please, you can start your cameras, you can start your microphones, and we are opening.
Questions, if you have any comments regarding the topics and what are the frequently asked questions you have to answer as NCPs. We are quite curious what's your experience so far.
Or if you want to share with us those who answer that they've worked with gender dimension before, if you want to share with us, for example, an example.
There just seems to be one comment regarding a file that Pavla shared. And did not come through. I don't know whether this applies to everyone.
I think the first file I shared was today's presentation, so I can share it again.
Mm-hmm. And just to highlight again and remind participants that the webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the GenderAction website in case you would like to go back to it together with the presentation.
Mm-hmm. And we have one question regarding the costs of development of gender equality plan. And right now I will share the fact sheet from European Commission. We don't have any like very real information about the eligibility costs, but European Commission announced that there will be special funding available for action supporting the development of inclusive gender equality plans under the part of the program called Widening Participation and Strengthening the European Research Area. And we also recommend you to follow up like national programs, which should also consider this eligibility criterion. And for example, in Czech Republic, there are or will be certain programs to support institutions to fulfill this this requirement.
There is a question from Laura, if JEP needs to be also in small and medium enterprises, if I understand it correctly. No, yes. Private companies are not required to have gender equality plans, only publicly funded finance bodies. So public research institutes, universities, etc., but enterprises and businesses not. And also not NGOs, if I remember correctly. Also, there was the eligibility, or actually the criterion of balanced research teams. From Christine, the question was, you already described the research team or project team in the research proposal. And this criteria will be only considered when there is, as Tima explained, when there is the same amount of points for two projects, then the evaluators will look into the gender balance in the teams, and then they will consider that as an extra points. But that will be only looked into if there is the same amount of points from the previous parts, such as excellence and so far.
Yes, but at the same time, as we mentioned, and as it is written in general annexes, the beneficiaries must aim to achieve to the widest extent as possible the gender balance at all levels of personnel assigned to the action. I just copy it into the comments, but it's mainly a symbolic, I would say, provision or requirement, because every national state is different with different background on gender equality, and it is not yet clear whether the commission will consider and into which extent they will consider how the beneficiaries really aimed to achieve the widest balance as possible. So it is more like symbolic statement to really support the idea of gender equality as a cross-cutting priority through the whole program and through all levels of the projects.
Any question we have missed here in the chat box?
I'm trying to, I think that we so far answered them all, even though we don't have any other news, as Siri, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly, as asked me about the support facility. European Commission said that it should be available during June, so fingers crossed for all of us. Because we are also dependent on these updates.
But from our information that we have from someone who's actually part of the ERAC group, there will be trainings provided publicly regarding gender and gender dimension and gender in the research proposals for Horizon Europe. So it's not only this training that is available, but there will be trainings provided directly from European Commission in upcoming season. This month, there was supposed to be a more detailed fact sheet on gender equality plans for Horizon Europe. It hasn't been launched yet so far as I know, but it was supposed to be launched this month, maybe next month. And as Timea says, next month, there will be also more information on the support facilities.
Okay, I see another comment. Okay, from Zuzana from Slovakia. And
creation qualitative. I would strongly recommend you also to refer people who are writing gender equality plans or who are responsible for gender equality plans in their institutions. I would recommend you to check website of Gender Equality Academy project. They provide also free trainings on gender equality plans and other issues connected to gender equality in research.
or Zuzana, you can certainly contact us through the Czech Center for Gender and Science for other recommendations. Thank you also, Liane. And two other messages. Yeah, thank you too. Thank you for your patience and presence and for your questions. Hopefully,
yeah, I wanted to sum up that there will be information coming directly from European Commission, more detailed, because this is still in the phase. The gender equality plan and the other provisions regarding gender are still in kind of negotiation phase, and some things are not unclear. So based on our feedbacks and feedbacks from different countries, they are still, European Commission is still working on making it clearer for everybody. So there will be directly from European Commission some more information and some trainings, but also the projects that are funded by Horizon Europe at this point, and then future Horizon Europe projects will be also providing more and more trainings, and for example on gender dimension, and so they are kind of working on these two levels, so directly from European Commission, but also through the projects. And yeah, we have direct information from European Commission through people who are part of ERAC. So we recommend you, if you have anyone in your country who is part of some working group on gender equality, or have anything to do directly with European Commission, we recommend you to contact those people as well, because they usually have information beforehand, before they are made public. So you can prepare yourselves for that through direct contacts from European Commission working groups.
And if I may add, we also have our third webinar of this series will be dedicated again to the gender equality plan. So it will be more focused in comparison to the present one. So I suppose that it takes place in about 2 weeks, a bit more than 2 weeks from now. It's on June the 15th. So I suppose that if by that time we have further information from the European Commission, I'm sure that Pavla and Timea will share all this information with you, because as we understand, judging from the two pillars of this webinar, the focus on the gender equality plans on the one hand, and the integration of the gender dimension. The first one seems to have attracted the most attention, as it relates to a new requirement in the Horizon Europe program. I would just, before we still have a few minutes, and before we end, in addition to thanking you for your interest and your participation, and obviously thanking our two gender experts, Pavla and Timea, for their presentation, I would just like to ask you to fill in the evaluation form. I will put it again on the chat, as this is important for us. And I will give the floor back to Timea and Pavla.
Thank you, Marina, very much. We are very happy to be able to be here with you today. Thank you for the opportunity, and hopefully see you all during next gender action webinars. Hopefully also with further information from the side of European Commission.
I also saw one kind of very important comment on whether the cost for gender equality plans are eligible or not. We know that at least for the trainings, the costs are eligible, and for the whole gender equality plans, you would have to apply. There will be particular call on creating inclusive gender equality plans within Horizon. So there will be definitely, you can even focus one whole project on it. But otherwise, Timea, I'm not sure. In Czech Republic, we have no national funding so far, and
we will have two. We will have two programs which will somehow make, for example, cost of gender audit eligible and so on. But the fact sheet on only says or states that there will be funding available for creation of inclusive gender equality plans, and under the certain part of the Horizon Europe, but we will get into the detail probably later.
Thanks, Tima. Thank you very much for inviting us, Marina, and thank you everybody for your attention and your time. And if you have any additional questions, you can always write us. You have our contact at the end of the presentation, and you can ask us or Marina. We will try to reply.
There seems to be one last question or comment from Leila. Regarding other EC programs, I guess in relation to the JEP requirement.
If you mean programs like Marie Skłodowska-Curie, that are actually Horizon Europe, but I don't know about other programs. There are other different fundings from, for example, European Innovation Council, as Tima mentioned. And
well, we don't have information about other European Commission programs, because we are focusing in our work on Horizon Europe and providing you information about the eligibility criterion and updates to help you with orientation in the problematics. But for example, as I know in Czech Republic, certain like measures or actions can be funded under different groups, for example, for the development of human resources, internalization, and so on. So it really depends if you are able to fit your project about development of gender equality plans to another program. But the Horizon Europe is the main framework program for the European research content.
If I may add, there are other DGs that also have calls for funding projects, whether it's, for example, DG Employment, who might have some projects that might relate to the gender aspects or for fundamental rights, but these do not fall under the Horizon Europe framework. So I think the advice would be to check the specific both eligibility and other type of requirements that are related to programs that are that fall outside Horizon Europe.
Okay, so I think that we don't have any other questions right now. Or yeah, and thank you, Marina, for this additional info.
Mm-hmm. And we hope that we will see you again in the upcoming webinars.
Okay, thank you very much all.
As Marina said, next week there will be a webinar on gender dimension in research, and 15th of June there will be a webinar on gender equality plans solely. So you are all welcome to join again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and have a great afternoon to you all.